How are you doing tonight, Brandon?
I'm doing really well, and I do want to thank you again for this opportunity. I mean, what a great space for us to play in for an hour or so and hear some music. And I was just sitting in your little digital green room
How
there,
are you doing
waiting
tonight, Brandon?
to start. And I'm
Well,
doing.
go ahead, keep going.
I'm getting a little bit of
Yeah,
a.
that was YouTube. I had to turn it off because
Oh,
it's
there's
actually feeding into it. I was worried about that. That's okay. We'll have the replay. So just
all is good.
yes,
YouTube's a wonderful thing, so we'll
that's
welcome YouTube as well. Yeah, I was in the digital green room there, just losing my brain to those vocals on Devotion, and then thinking, why didn't I write a track called Devotion as well?
so yeah, it's great to have you on the program. So, you're primarily a bassist, and that's how the world was introduced to you. Your first album, Time was the Time on My Hands. Is that correct?
Right, yeah.
And beautiful bass, your tonal quality was one of your trademarks, and then you followed up with Sentiment, which was also another amazing piece of art. But in this Destiny, you have introduced really the instrument that got you into music in the first place. Talk to us about that.
Right. So yeah, it's been a journey for sure. And my musical journey from a playing perspective began shockingly 50 years ago. And so the piano was where this whole thing started for me. Now, all the way through that time, since beginning to play bass and exploring bass and starting to get my own voice on a bass, I've always kept keyboards and piano in the background because I write quite a lot of stuff on there as well. And I love playing. There's nothing better than sitting down with a real piano and just hashing out some stuff. What I wanted to do though on this new album was stick to my sort of philosophy to date, right? I've done some collaboration stuff with other people, had some great chances to get and play on tracks with other people that have come along and said, hey, let's get your bass tone on my song. More than happy to do that. What I wanted to do with Destiny, though, was continue down this solo path, but embellish what I've been doing with what I began in doing in music, which was keyboards and piano. So throughout the album, and you've heard, I think you've heard every track so far.
Yes.
There's a gradual increase in the amount of pianos that are included. I use a wonderful piece of kit called Keyscape, which is a digital sample library of various pianos and electric pianos and Fender Rhodes and Yamaha Grands and all that good stuff. And so the sound quality is one thing, but you also have to be able to come forward and bring up some skills to actually use the sound quality and make it you. So I'm super pleased with the way this has turned out. I think the way that the piano and the bass now work together is really going to change things up from sort of my musical brand perspective, and hopefully also allow people a little bit of insight into where it all began for me, because it wasn't jazz, it was classical and very strict classical. And I think some of that also comes through even in the way I voice some of the chords on a piano. It's not necessarily a jazz guy, and I've never alluded to be a jazz piano player. I know some wonderful jazz piano players, and I'm not in that camp by any means. But sitting down and knocking some chords through and then making something that I think is beautiful out of that is right. That was the goal, and I think that's where I've landed.
Right. So if Destiny was a book and the 12 tracks or 12 chapters, kind of tell us, what that's about, why Destiny and how do the tracks flow?
Yeah.
In that.
Yeah. So there's a lot of different ideas gone into this album. And I think briefly we should go back to understand a little bit about what's happened to all of us in the last 25, 6, whatever months it is. I lose track now. Mm-hmm. I got into last year, start of last year, and I thought, okay, well, we've gone through 2020 and here we are in 2021, and I want to make some more music and all that good stuff. But of course, in the background and surrounding that, life continues to go on and things change. So I started writing, I started recording. I got to probably late fall of last year, and then started what was a painful process of reviewing what I've been working on and deciding this is not what I want to do. This is not the quality I want to put out, and it's not really going to represent what I'm about these days. So I got rid of a lot of stuff last year, sadly, but came into the very early part of this year with a different outlook and a different perspective on it for a couple of reasons, and we may get into those later on. We'll see. But ultimately, what it gave me was real clarity around, to your point, if this is going to be a book, what are those chapters? So, the tracks, we kick off with Tell Me, which is the current single. It's the first track on the album, and it's doing well. It's a strong tune. It was written to be a radio-friendly track. I set out purposely to do that. Obviously, I listen to the other folks in this space and understand what they're doing. And really what it is, it's a conversation between the bass melody and then this piano string mix piece in the background as well. So there's definitely discussion taking place. The point of this track, though, was that after 2 years of what we've been dealing with COVID, it was an ask of tell me what's really going on, right? We've had misinformation, disinformation, that information, not enough of the real information. Exactly, right? Right, exactly. All of the above. And so it's a bit of a call to action to say, hey, just tell me really what is going on. Because, sometimes news isn't great, but you are better off knowing about it.
Yes.
Right.
I like it. So let's kick it off. You want to play Tell Me first and then go on to the next one? Okay.
Let's do Tell Me. It'd be great.
All right. So I'm Doc Hardy, listening to WPKN. Welcome everybody on YouTube who has joined us on the Doc Hardy Show YouTube page. And appreciate you joining the Simulcast. Brandon Rothwell is my guest, and we're going to step through his album Destiny. This first track is called Tell Me. So that's Tell Me off of Brendan's new album, Destiny, your signature bass sound really in that first song. And definitely I can see radio ready, radio friendly. I've played it a few times on my shows and, good response from the listeners.
Thank you. Oh, signature sound, maybe I have Leo Fender to thank for that. It's a jazz bass through an amp. It works every time.
Awesome. All right. The next track is called Meant to Be. So in this story called Destiny, Chapter 2, Meant to Be, talk to us about that.
Yeah. Well, again, not to labor the COVID point, and so we'll maybe kind of call it quits for that one tonight, but things do change, right? So Meant to Be, the thinking behind this tune was really understanding the meaning of events in life, how they unfolded, and then realizing that perhaps that is how they were meant to be. We all spend so much time analyzing and thinking and overthinking and worrying, and sometimes stuff just happens and let it be, and it's meant to be.
I like it. I like it. This is Meant to Be. Brendan Rothwell. The album is Destiny. I'm Doc Hardy. You're listening to The Doc Hardy Show on WPKN 89.5, broadcasting from downtown Bridgeport, Connecticut. That's called Meant to Be from my guest, Brendan Rothwell, off his new release. It's about a month now, Destiny. I was listening to what I thought was a conversation between the bottom bass and the bass playing the melody. And that was interesting. Just the kind of the way you went back and forth. It was, I like that. It was cool. Next
Yeah.
track is called Drifting.
Right.
Drifting.
This was kind of cool because there's a track on the Sentiment album. I think it was one of your favorites actually, called Strolling.
Yes. Yeah.
And so
is that the one that was based on you and Lisa walking after walking? Yes.
You got it exactly right, man.
Yes.
Your memory is as good as your musical knowledge.
One of my favorite songs. That's correct. Strolling.
Right. So there's something about that pace in music, right? Where you physically just want to walk. So Drifting kind of takes that idea and spins it up a little bit higher. And again, I mean, you've alluded to this right now from the last track we played, but with Drifting, similar idea. So it's this whole melody piece. It just floats along, does its thing, whether it's walking or drifting or strolling or whatever it may be, but it gets pulled away. So some of the chords that you're going to hear in this track are maybe not strictly contemporary / smooth jazz. Maybe they're just kind of, wow, that guy's been playing piano 50 years and has figured this out, right? So it's a little different. But I love it because then what it does is that melody piece just pulls it all back in and it keeps on drifting.
I listened to the CD under different circumstances, the music under different circumstances. And I think one day I was at the beach, listening to it at the beach, and I was watching the water. I think this is the song. The song came on, and it was just kind of, as the waves were doing their thing, it was almost like a synchronization between your music and the water, and the waves of the Long Island Sound just come crashing on the shore. It was really, really interesting.
Right. Natural ebb and flow, right? Yes. It happens everywhere. Yeah.
Awesome. So this is track number 3 off Destiny. It's called Drifting. My guest is Brendan Rothwell. You're listening to the Doc Hardy Show on WPKN. So that's Drifting off of the album Destiny by my guest bassist pianist. I'm going to just start calling you multi-instrumentalist, Brendan Ralph. Now, it's interesting, that particular song, one of your influences is one of my favorite musicians, Marcus Miller. And in your biography, it talks about the fact that, the 1986 album Tutu was a big influence in you becoming a lead bass player and making that your primary instrument. And I could hear his influence in that song.
Wow.
And the way he does, the way he does his conversation between two basses. And he explained in his documentary how he does it if he doesn't have a second bassist, how he does it himself, how he plays like there are two. And I hear that in that song, and that's incredible bass play on your part. And it's I could hear that conversation and just that tonal quality and just the way he goes about it. So
well, that's an incredible compliment on your part, my behalf, your behalf, I don't know which way around that goes, but thank you. Yeah, I mean, he is the reason I play bass. I mean, maybe not why I play lead bass, because that has evolved and other people have influenced that as well. But fundamentally, the bass thing for me happened, as you say, 1986, the Tutu album, and I was hooked. And I've told him that as well a couple of times.
That's amazing. That's great. Now, My Time is the next track. What can you tell us about My Time?
Well, My Time, as the title may suggest, we talked at the top of the hour here about the influences of different types of instrumentation on my music. And My Time really was an opportunity to evolve the role of the piano, the keyboards in my recorded music. As I say, I've always played, so this is not a new thing that I'm suddenly saying, hey, world, I've just, learned how to play piano. It's always been there.
Right.
But I've been so focused on the bass thing for all the right reasons and getting my chops together and getting my voice together with that instrument. And now it's my time. It's my time to bring this together and start to blend that full sound.
Okay. Brendan Rothwell is my guest. His album is called Destiny. It's available on all platforms, and the next track is called My Time. That was called My Time, off of the album Destiny by my guest Brendan Rothwell. Yeah, it's definitely your time. The acoustic, piano, and then of course the Rhodes. So I can hear the Fender Rhodes at the end. And you commented in our little chat we have going on about the fretless fill-ins.
Right.
I was like, oh yeah, that's great. Now behind you, you have a couple of bass guitars. You want to talk about those? I mean, they're in the picture. Maybe
Yeah.
our YouTube listeners, but probably looking. What are those bass guitars? And talk to us about.
Right. So this guy, well, how long have I had this? I think 2008, 2007, 2008. I bought that. It's a US Fender, regular off the shelf, 4-string Fender jazz bass.
Okay.
Nothing has been changed on it. Nothing's been modded. It's, if you walk in a store and buy it tomorrow, it's the same thing. It's in here because I'm working on some new stuff right now.
Okay.
That bass though is the one that I used on This Is the Love, which was the first single I put out from the first album way back in 2017, I guess. And there is something about it. I don't know what it is, but that instrument, every time you take it out of the case, it just, same tonal quality every time. Fenders are not known for that. They kind of shift and they move with air temperature and moisture and humidity and all that kind of stuff. But this thing has always had the same tone. So
Wow.
I kind of, it's a go-to. And then the other one, this is actually it's new. It's an Ibanez. They call it their boutique series. I realized that my original fretless bass is actually, I've had it 35 years this year.
Wow.
So we got late into last year, and Lisa, my wife, who's upstairs listening in and enjoying a glass of something that isn't water, said, hey, why don't we go and see what's out there? So we found this thing actually over in Toronto. It's the other side of Canada from me, but the music store that I use here in town, they're a national chain. They searched their inventory, and this thing had been sitting in a warehouse somewhere for 2 years, never even been unboxed. They brought it in. It's a 5-string, it's fretless. And so the track we just played, at the first part of that track where the melodies on the piano, in the background of those little fretless lead fills, that's that instrument. And it's beautiful. Bartolini pickups for those techies who are listening and watching, and active electronics, and it's great. But it's also made me change my thinking around the strings, right? So I've always played sort of regular round strings. And in the old days, back in sort of 69 and 70, when Earth, Wind and Fire were kicking around and starting up, flat wound strings were very much a thing. It's a completely different feel, right? It's literally like playing on glass. These are halfway between, and I always thought it would really deaden the tone because they used to. But technology being what it is now, they can make these strings that feel correct for a fretless, but they still keep all the brightness. So I'm very pleased about that.
Thank you for the technical details. I kind of like that geeky stuff.
I know.
Track number 5 is Foundation. This is one of my favorite tracks on the album. I like the introduction to
cool.
it. Talk to us about it.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you briefly. I actually have a book in here for those who are watching as well. This is the autobiography of a guy called Francis Jackson, actually Dr. Francis Jackson. It's called Music for a Long While. Francis passed away earlier this year at the age of 104, which is pretty crazy. Wow. But Francis taught me when I was a chorister back in 1977-ish for about 4 or 5 years. He was the master of music. And so it was extremely classically background, high church stuff going on. But then years later, in fact, last year, I read his autobiography, and I find out that during the war, which he was a part of, he actually started to explore jazz, and he quite liked saxophone. Now, this guy was one of the most prolific cathedral organists in the world of the last 100 years, who also loved jazz. His son, Eddie, still lives in New York, where I'm originally from. Eddie is a jazz bass player. I'm sure there's no, right? It's strange how the world works out. Anyway, so Foundation is, if anything, I guess, is partly around that. It's where do you see yourself fitting in, and what is it that you do? And so as a bass player, Foundation for me is about being solid from the ground up.
Okay, well, let's get it in. It's called Foundation from Brendan Rothwell off his CD, Destiny. Doc Hardy. That song was called Foundation from my guest, Brendan Rothwell. You're listening to the Doc Hardy Show on WPKN 89.5 FM. We're broadcasting from downtown Bridgeport, Connecticut, and we're reaching Fairfield, Litchfield, and New Haven counties in Connecticut, and Suffolk County on New York's Long Island, and streaming around the world at WPKN.org. You can also download our free app, WPKN Live, and if you have smart devices, you can tell the ladies, Alexis or Siri, to please play WPKN. Brendan Rothwell, we're playing every track on his new release, Destiny. It was released July 1st, holiday up there in Canada, I believe, right? That day, Canada Day.
It is our nation's holiday, our nation's birthday. It's Canada Day.
Yeah. So was that a strategic launch on that day for you, or just?
Yeah, it was on my part. For the Canadians that are listening, I think my friends in America kind of went, that's nice. That's okay. It's okay. You know, we're not quite the 51st state, but we're a big place. So it's a huge deal. Canada is home for us now. And, you know, we were able to fly out actually to Ottawa, our capital city, out on the eastern side of the country there for a few days and spend the time there and watch the album release and unfold on the platforms. And yeah, it was a good time. First flight in 2 years as well.
Now, we had a conversation, I think in the last interview we did about streaming. You are, to me, one of the musicians who get it. You know, a lot of musicians complain about streaming and the pennies and all that sort of thing. But you seem to have perfected or continue to work on this idea of streaming. And at one point, I was just looking through some information here. At one point, one of your last, you had a song, was it Keep On Keeping On, that was on all the charts, three different charts at the same time. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's pretty amazing to get that type of streaming and listenership off of contemporary jazz. Can you talk a little bit about that, your view of streaming and why, you know, kind of what you do and why you do it?
Yeah, I'd love to, and thank you. It's a huge deal. So I think in all of us there's a little piece, and maybe in some of us there's a slightly bigger piece that simply likes to complain, right? I mean, right? Yep. My accent gives away. I'm originally from the UK. I love the UK. I have friends in the UK, and the Brits are known for a couple of things: forming queues. We don't know what that is really. Some James Bond character, and complaining. So it's part of life, right?
Right.
I get it. We all do it. The difference is when you think about why you're complaining and then realize what you're complaining about and turn it upside down. So is streaming a way to make $1 million? No. Did Spotify ever go online and say, hey, musicians, come see us, we'll make you $1 million? No. Can I reach 5,000 people in the city I live in today? No. Can I reach 50,000 people every day around the world because of Spotify? Yep. So you accept that basically what you're going to get here is a schwack of free PR, free press, free publicity, free branding, as long as you've done your homework and you've got your branding together.
Uh-huh.
You can take that, you can hashtag it, you can tag it, you can do whatever you want to do. No one's going to get upset. The least that will happen is that you probably increase your audience and you probably increase the number of streams that you're getting. It's not a race, right? You shouldn't be doing this to say, well, I got 51,000 and that's more than you. It's not about that. It's about how can we share in the wealth of music that exists. Most people aren't even aware of how many musicians and acts are on Spotify right now. Okay. Right. So I love data. I dug. There's 11 million. So how do you want to make $1 million when there's 11 million other people doing the same thing as you? Right. And I'm in this tiny little world called jazz. I'm not a rap guy, right? I'm not an R&B guy in that sense. So my slice of that audience cake is thin, right? It's a wedge, but it's pretty thin. And I've got to share that with some big names. You know, there's Brian Culbertson out there. There's Marcus Miller out there. I'm not even going to do the list, right? Right. Then you get to the independent artists like me and Christian de Missones and Sylvia and Wayne and all these people that I now know and work with, and it's wonderful. we all talk about this stuff, right? And so I'm really keen that people understand that out of every negative is actually a positive. And in fact, what you thought was a negative, you may just have got it wrong. Spotify, Apple, all those things are wonderful platforms, literally, to get yourself on. And then you have to work it. They won't give it to you for free. Nothing in life happens like that. But I think the more musicians that get behind this and understand that it's not going to pay you $1 million, but if you got into music to make $1 million, get out.
That's wise advice.
There's only so many guys called Sting, right? I mean,
that's it.
I may play bass, but I ain't going to get Sting's income, so no.
Right. Wow. All right. Track number 6 is called Divine. And talk to us about Divine.
Well, so this is where my Anglo/North American accent causes a problem. So there's a wonderful quotation, which is to err is human, to forgive divine. Mm-hmm. In North American English, it's to err is human, to forgive divine. What it means is to make a mistake. So immediately what they're saying is everyone makes mistakes. The beautiful part about that is if you can learn to forgive. That quote is something like 300 years old, believe it or not. So people have figured this out for quite a long time. And here we are now. The track itself, musically, I wanted to create an environment that was as if I had an orchestra. And I don't. I have a little room in my house that you can see behind me and some keyboards and 50 years of knowledge of how to play them and some basses. So off we go. I put the track together. And my hope is that what listeners will hear is that it's a beautiful acoustic bass lead line over kind of an orchestra that really isn't, but who cares?
All right. Let's check it out. The song is called Divine. My guest is Brendan Rothwell. Here we go. That's a beautiful song. It's called Divine. I don't know. I kind of had almost an existential experience listening to it because I think divine spirituality is, I just kind of, uh, almost a song to meditate to, just kind of put it on in the
Right.
morning and it just, very relaxing. But I heard the orchestra, like you said, I didn't notice that. Once you mentioned the concept, I listened to it differently, and
Right.
yeah, I can hear that. So a question I have about your, who does your mixing and engineering production? Do you do all of that yourself?
Yeah. So that side of the knowledge I have really goes back kind of again mid-80s onwards, right? So I had a friend in York where I was living, and he had a little recording studio and tape, right? I mean, there's no internet back then. It's just, edit was find the point, get a razor blade, cut the tape, get the Chinograph pencil, and tape it back together and hope for the best. So now we have things like Command X and Command V. It makes life a little easier. But yeah, because these are solo albums that I've been putting together, it kind of made sense to me to stick to my script, right? Keep it true to myself. And so the mixing side of things, I've always enjoyed that anyway. I love balance. I mean, clearly looking at my shirt, you wouldn't know I like balance. But I love balance. And so bringing sounds together and making that whole mix piece happen is something I've always enjoyed doing, whether it's live sound for bands or in a studio. The engineering side, yes, I do all that, but there's really no mystery to it these days. I mean, I have a Mac, I use Logic, I have AD interfaces, a bunch of guitars, some keyboards, and a ton of experience. So that is not as tricky as people sometimes think. The only piece of the work to put an album together that I really sort of outsource is the mastering process.
Right. I was going to ask about that. Okay.
Yeah, it's something I've never done. I understand it. I've never done that. I could. I mean, there's templates you can download that kind of walk you through it. But I don't think there's anything better than a second set of ears when you're trying to put music together. So I have a guy here in town, Spencer Chain, who is a phenomenal musician. He's a drummer and a musician, just for the drummer joke. There's just a killer player. He plays for some of the really big country names up here as well, right? But he's an audio engineer, and his mastering skills are ridiculous. And I use him because he's not only an engineer, he is a musician, and you can hear it in the finished products. It's cool. I got a beautiful note. I have to tell you this real quick. From my friend Miles Gilderdale from Acoustic Alchemy. Right. And Miles and I have known each other over 30 years ago. I sound really old. I should stop saying that. But Miles and I have known each other for a while. And I got a note from him about a week ago. He played the new album at home. He'd just been touring the States with Alchemy, and he got home and he played the album. And he sent me a note. He said, "Wow, man, even the polish is polished." I'll take that. From him, I'll take that for sure.
And you do all the percussion as well for your songs?
Yeah, I do. Although I have to give another little shout out here. So there's a company in town, actually, it's part of Spencer Chain's world, called One Up Loops. And you can find them, not surprisingly, at oneuploops.com. They've spent a ton of time recording physical human players, right? So they've gone in with shakers and tambourines, and they've not only recorded these things, they've done them at every tempo. So it used to be, you would bring in some kind of percussion loop and you would change the tempo to sit with your track, and it usually you got away with it. These guys have done every tempo increment. Wow. And they've used multiple mics. So you can go in and say, okay, it's exactly 96 BPM. It's this kind of feel. It's not straight. It's kind of slinky, kind of greasy feel. And I want it off a specific Neumann microphone. Download, boom, done. And it's like $50 a year. So anybody who's producing music, you have to go and help yourself to that stuff.
The recordings are human drummers, so it's real.
Exactly. Yeah.
I was wondering if someone tracked the drums for you. I never. I think I've wanted to ask that question. This is the third interview. I never asked about who plays. Right.
So the One Up Loop stuff is the percussion on this new album. The drums on this new album, though, are all programmed by me. So they're samples that I then program. The only time I've had real drummers, so the first album, Time on My Hands, I'd actually hooked up with Poogie Bell, who was the drummer for Marcus Miller for many years, amongst other things and other people. Right. And I hooked up with him on LinkedIn, just quite honestly, because I thought it was
I
cool.
remember this story. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and I said, what would it take? What would it take? Anyway, he ended up playing drums on the track that became This Is the Love, that was the first single.
Right.
The other drummer I have on that album on Decade is Chris Bailey, who's like, the list of who he hasn't played for is probably, you know, a little easy to read. And then I went completely solo with the Sentiment album, and of course now with Destiny as well. But it was cool. Everything else on that album is programmed, but those two are live drummers. And it's kind of strange, I guess, as a bass player. I love working with great drummers. Great drummers are sometimes hard to find, though, as well. And I think there is something, if you can build in human feel to programmed and sequenced music, which I aim to do. I think that does speak volumes.
No, I think it's done very well, because you know, I had to listen to it to try to determine what it was. That's why I asked the question. I couldn't tell. All right, track 7 is Origin. What can you tell us about Origin, Brandon?
Yeah, well, it suggests it in the name again, I guess. It's about knowing where you're coming from to then figure out where you're going. It's a bit of a late night Eastern US time head scratcher. But it's fundamentally, it's what it's about. We've all had a lot of time, certainly back in 2020, when things went a little sideways for the planet, and most of us were sitting at home for at least a week, if not a few months, and kind of thinking through, well, what now, right? I have to stand 6 feet from everybody for the rest of time. If I go to Safeway, I have to stand 6 feet from the guy who's buying asparagus, because it was weird, right?
Yeah. Yes.
But it did give us time to also go beyond that craziness and start to really think about, well, so what was before? How was I? Where have I come from? And where is it I'm trying to get to? I think there's a lot of value in doing that. And for me, musically, it meant I could put something together that kind of says, bang, here we go. Here's what's next. And Origin, it's funny that there's a little sequencer part in the opening few bars of this track. And the inspiration for it actually was The Cure, which some people may know of. The Cure were a huge kind of mid-80s onwards goth post-punk band, who I loved in my youth. They're still going now. They're still touring. I think they're all in their mid-60s or whatever, but they had this really cool sound when sequencing first started out. They used to use it everywhere, so that's what inspired that piece. But Origin fundamentally is that. Where have I come from? What do I know? Where am I going to go to next?
I'm Doc Hardy, listening to the Doc Hardy Show on WPKN. We're broadcasting from downtown Bridgeport, Connecticut. My guest is Brendan Rothwell. We are stepping through the book, the album called Destiny. We are on chapter 7. Origin is the song. Let's have a listen. So that's Origin off of the album Destiny by my guest, Brendan Rothwell. Uh, Brendan, this is 12 original compositions. And I think all your albums, everything is original, right? I don't
Right.
recall you ever doing a cover. Um, is there a reason for that, or what's your view of covers? Will you ever do a cover of someone else's song?
Yeah, I think I will. I think also when you listen to a lot of the stuff that's out there, I mean, let's say, well, okay, let's go Earth, Wind, and Fire, right?
Right.
I mean, as a bass player, I could spend a lot of time just sitting down here playing those bass lines. There's some killer stuff. For me to do one of those songs justice in a cover format is, I mean, I can see you smiling already. It's not going to happen easily, right? There's a couple of things not stacked in my favor. So, you know, we have to think about this and say, okay,
Right.
well, what would make a suitable cover for me as an artist to actually record, right? Which could be different to what would I like to record. I'd love to play a Verdine bass line. But why would I do that? He's done it. Don't try and recreate the wheel, right? Because if I did, it'd be square, and that's not cool. So I think there are some tracks out there that I'd love to play. Interestingly, and maybe an obvious choice is the holiday time, Christmas time. I mean, there's some beautiful music out there that, you know, I sit here in my 50-something year, and even now I do cry a little at Christmas time in the music because it's beautiful stuff, right? So there's some pieces in there. There's some other, you know, bits of jazz that maybe I'd like to do, and maybe there's some bits of rock that I'd like to do as well. But my focus has been continuing to sort of build out my brand and build out my sound. Not that I necessarily know the final destination for it, but if I keep building it and people say I like this, but I'm not so sure about that, at least I can then start to steer it that way. And if we do some covers in the background, or we do something next year, who knows, right? The collaborations things I've done so far, I mean, it's been great just from the perspective of meeting these people as well, right? And some good music's come out of that. And so I think the writing piece, the original or originality aspect of music is still exciting to me. And so doing a cover, sure, there's plenty of great covers out there. I'm not quite there yet, but we'll see.
Well, I think it's refreshing. You know, it's nice to have original music to play, you know, along with some of the covers that people do. You know, I appreciate your comments because I think I saw a clip Smokey Robinson was talking about, you know, songs, and he said there was a time when the song was king, not the artist. The song was king.
Right.
And he gave an example of a song. I forget the song, but like he named all the major artists that year that did that song, that one song, like 12 major artists. And he said today, you know, the emphasis on the artist, so you know, and not so much on the song. And I never really thought about it that way, but it did strike me that, you know, covers, if you are to be done judiciously, because the song is king. You don't want.
Well, if I go back, those of you on radio won't be able to see this, obviously, but those of you on YouTube will. So I'm going to go back to this book, right? Music for a Long While, the autobiography of Francis Jackson. I mean, if you want to talk about cover tunes, I spent 5 years every day singing music that was 200 to 300 to 400 years old. That's about as unoriginal as it gets, right? But it's the church, and it's huge, and it has, I mean, you talk about Spotify numbers, try the church, right?
Yeah.
It's huge. It's literally global. And so people listen to this stuff, and there's a familiarity to it that makes it safe and secure and comfortable and reassuring. And that, of course, fundamentally is why for many people, the church is such an important part of their lives, and rightly so. But there's nothing actually original about the music that you hear in that type of church. Now, there's different churches all over the world, and there's some fairly funky churches in your part of the world where I may even fit in as a bass player, right? But that wasn't going to happen in high Anglican UK church back in the 70s because it wasn't going to happen. So I think, yeah, there's elements of music that we all pick up on and we all relate differently to. I think some of the covers that are out there whether it's the jazz world or the rock world or whatever. I think there's some brilliant work being done. However, you're absolutely right. It does become more about, well, Adele, the brand, as opposed to the song that she didn't write.
Right.
Because
Right.
It's an ongoing kind of philosophical issue, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But it's a big one now because of things like the digital platforms, and because we can all make music at home, and there's pretty much endless possibilities. But the caveat that should be put around that is there's no guarantee it's all going to be great.
Right.
And so there's an element of luck, there's an element of driving and pushing and branding and all those other pieces that come into the business side of music for sure. But fundamentally, it's not about how good you think you are. It's about how respected and how enjoyed what you do is.
Well said. Well stated. I'm Doc Hardy. You're listening to the Doc Hardy Show on WPKN, and my guest is a multi-instrumentalist. I'm going to start practicing that word, Brendan Rothwell. We're talking about his new CD called Destiny, kind of walking through this musical book, and we're on track number 8, chapter 8, Diamond. What can you tell us about Diamond?
Diamond's real simple. My kind of crib notes here is simply that. Diamond is forever. The concept behind this one, if you think about, though, what it takes to create a diamond, ultimately it's pressure. Mm-hmm. And you think about the pressures that all of us have. This isn't another COVID story, don't worry. Just in general life, like long before 2020, right? We all have pressures in life. We have financial pressures, we have job pressures, we have family pressure. All these things come up and come up and come up time and time again. And so you can come out the other side of that, beat up, upset, down, depressed, whatever, or you can come out and try and shine. Diamond.
All right. The song is called Diamond. The artist is my guest, Brendan Rothwell. You're listening to the Doc Hardy Show. So that was Diamond by my guest, Brendan Rothwell. Brendan, next up was the title track, Destiny.
Right. This was kind of cool. And, to your question about if it was a chapter, what would it mean? So really the concept behind this is about bringing what we know to direct the course of future events. Another book I want to throw into the conversation here is 12 Notes on Life and Creativity. This is Quincy Jones's latest tome, and it's wonderful. It's not a difficult read. I would implore everybody to go get this and check it out. The reason I bring it up is that, so obviously it's 12 notes, right? Mm-hmm. Note G is share what you know. Now, Quincy Jones, he's done a few things in his time, right? He's worked with a few people in his a couple of things, right? When you read this book, you realize quite how ridiculous that world that he's built is, and the people that are involved. But as you read through it, you realize also how completely genuine he is when he talks about things such as sharing skills and abilities, right? It's the only way to build a better thing, whether it's a song, a tune, a cover version, whether it's a building, you have to share. It's the irony of putting out solo albums, right? It's a solo album, but it's not as if I came up with that sequence of this or that type of playing. This is, if you like, this is all a cover. The whole thing is a cover when people play music, because everything has inspired us or taught us something along the way. So to hear from someone like you that you can hear my bass playing has been inspired by Marcus Miller is a huge compliment. And thank you again for that. But it also proves the point, right? It also proves the point. I sound like this because of somebody else. Now, the goal ultimately is to put my own spin on that and generate my own voice. And that's really what I've been working on and what I think I'm working towards now. But I would also point out when we play this track, so yes, it is the title track. And it was a little, I guess I was a little nervous about doing this, but I do actually sing in this track.
Oh, okay. I think Craig, you when we talked during the summer, you played a clip of this. I think.
Yeah, I did.
Yes,
and I've told people about it, and they go, "Well, I didn't hear you singing words." No, I don't sing words.
Right.
There's another bass player that I've met a few times recently who's very good at playing and singing, kind of almost like a scat style.
Right.
And so, if anything, this is a little bit of a homage to him and that style. It's cool. It's a cool way to play. But I was, I guess, maybe nervous or trepidatious about doing it because I've never recorded myself singing before. I've sung for years as a kid. My voice is strange. My accent is bizarre. The things are stacking up against why I should ever record it, but I did. And to your earlier question about who mixes your music, I do. So it's way, way back in the mix, but it actually works really well. And if you mute it and do a playback, you immediately know it's gone. I'm going to give a little shout here as well. I have some fans became friends in North Carolina. So Vanessa and Nathan, I think they're listening tonight. And I sent them a copy of this CD when it first got back from the press. And I got a call. She's like, "Is that you? Are you singing?" Wow. Clearly it was too high in the mix because Vanessa heard it, but it's it's there. But it adds a cool little dimension to this tune, and I love the tune. So yeah, let's do it.
All right, let's check it out. We'll see. Listen close to see if we can hear Brendan singing. Brendan Rothwell's my guest.
Not too closely.
We're talking about his new CD, Destiny. This song is called Destiny. It is the title track. Here we go. Title track from Destiny by my guest, Brendan Rothwell. It's funny because, when you first came on the scene with Time on My Hands, I think there's always, we all do it. When you hear somebody for the first time, you tend to compare what they're doing with someone that that you're familiar with. I did the same thing. I heard elements of different artists in that first CD. But I found myself, that's why just a little brief review I wrote. I call this, I feel like it's your breakout project, because for the first time, I didn't feel inclined to say anything other than this is the new one from Brendan.
Wow.
His signature sound is there, present in the beginning. Then there's the shift with My Time, the shift where you introduced the acoustic in the Fender Rhodes and show that element, and that comes in later on toward the end. But yeah, it's you. This is who you are. This is your destiny. And I get it now. It's like,
right.
yeah, okay, that was the idea. So yeah, it makes perfect sense. I hear it musically, and it makes sense the way you develop it. So good job.
Cool. Thank you. And I'm trying to think quite when you did this, but I know at one point you put together a quote for me. I was building my little static image quotes, and you said, he doesn't sound like, I forget who you put in there. It was crazy. He doesn't sound like Wayman Tisdale. He doesn't sound like Marcus Miller. He sounds like Brendan Rothwell.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Thank you.
That's those are my, I have my half a dozen people that that was early in the game. I've listened to so many people now.
Right.
So I don't feel inclined to do that. And I think I think we talked about this. I interviewed Chris Jasper of the formerly of the Isley Brothers, and I asked him about his signature sound, because he can create new music like you are. The music is new, but there's something underneath it that lets you know, oh, that's Brendan. Oh, that's Chris. Oh, that's Chris. And he explained, because he's Juilliard trained, classically trained, and he explained that he uses pretty much the same chord progressions as a foundation for everything, and then he puts the new stuff, the melodies, the whatever on top of it. So that's why it sounds like. You listen to the Isley Brothers, you could tell the 10 years he was with that group, because when he came, he changed, and when he left, it changed. Because what he did with the chord progressions, no one else has done.
Right.
Before him. So, and you do something similar, I feel.
Thank you. I think this also kind of kicks back to your question about cover tunes, though, as well. I don't want this to sound at all non-humble or conceited, but I do think I have a way to go before I'm truly known for that sound. Now, whether it's this album that does it, or it's the next one, or whatever I do next that kind of cracks that for me, I don't know. But it would be a little tough for me to do a cover version of somebody else's music now and expect the world to go, oh, that's that good. Because no, I'm still quite new. I'm getting older, and I've been doing this a long time, but I'm still quite new to the recording and releasing of music world and trying to build that audience. So I'm gonna keep on that path for now.
Yep, that makes perfect sense. We're on chapter 10 now. Is it Carmel or Carmel?
Carmel.
Carmel.
Yeah. Carmel.
Carmel.
If I did it in my English accent and it was the candy, it would be caramel, which is very strange. But no, it's Carmel the place. Which is such a beautiful, beautiful part of the world. So we got to go there originally in 2019, February, Valentine's weekend, for the Jazz Weekender Festival. So the smoothjazz.com put the Jazz Weekender Festival together, and we went down, and it was very, very cool. We got to meet a ton of the artists that we'd been listening to for a long time, and specifically, of course, I got to meet with Nathan East, which was kind of a big deal because he's on a few records, I think,
couple
over time.
He's done a Earth, Wind and Fire covers too. So
you think so, right?
He's done a couple.
Dude hangs out with Verdine just for fun, right? Anyway, so I met him. I tell you this, he is, aside from being clearly a fairly handy bass player, One of the most generous people with time that I've ever met. So we were due to leave the festival, whatever morning it was, Monday or Tuesday or something. And I'd emailed him the night before. I said, we're going to be having dinner. If you're around, it'd be great to chat. And, didn't really expect much, I guess, because who the hell am I? And he was traveling with his family as well, right? His wife and kids were there. And anyway, about 2:30 the next morning, I get this note from him. He says, hey, I'll meet you in the lobby at 8. So I'm like, okay. So I get up, I think, at 3:30 just to make sure I'm ready. Trundle down there with my bass, and we're chatting away. And I just kind of put together what was going to be the sentiment piece. Got this thing going, and it was about to be released. And we had this big conversation about basses and, the Dingwall bass that I play, the funky multi-scale guitars. And it was quite incredible. Got some great photographs. And anyway, long story short, we got to a point of, okay, well, this is great. Thanks for your time. And we'll see you again. We were back there in 2020, right before COVID hit. So February 2020, we all went to Carmel again, hooked up. By this point, of course, the Sentiment album had been out for a year. It had done its thing. I got a #1. It was all wonderful stuff. And still very gracious with his time, and still very happy to chat. And you meet people like that who are literally at the top of their game, and they still want to make time to discuss and chat and learn and share. And it's a massive, massive piece. And it dispels so many of the kind of rumors and stories about the industry side of music. Of course, the stuff goes on, of course, everywhere. But when you've got somebody who is at that level, that well respected, on that many recordings, and plays like a trooper now, it really does open your eyes to the fact that things can be done. And of course, he's one of these guys like Quincy Jones who believes in the fact that there are only 12 notes. And so, sure, I fall into the same kind of chord shapes because I like ninths. That's just how it is. I'm a bass player who plays lead, and so ninths kind of work really well on bass. And so I sit there on a keyboard, and sure, does it mean my stuff is samey? No, it means that it's developing a sound of its own, and there are certain ways and progressions that I like that then allow me to convey what I like through music. There are only 12 notes. Don't ever let anybody tell you different. Whether you're rap or you're R&B or you're jazz or you're classical, same notes.
Awesome. So the song is called Carmel. My guest is Brendan Rothwell. You're listening to the Doc Hardy Show on WPKN, Bridgeport, Connecticut. So that's Carmel by my guest, Brendan Rothwell, off of his new release, his latest release called Destiny. That's a ride through the country, roll the windows down, open the sunroof type song.
That's exactly what it is. And,
Yeah.
you know, if you've been there, you'll know. I mean, you're absolutely right. That coast road and you're just checking out the view. If you haven't been there, my hope is that hearing that takes you there, because it's exactly that. You got it exactly right.
Next up is Solitude.
Yeah. Chapter on this one, right? So solitude, again, as the name suggests, there are times in life when you really need to be thinking alone to determine what's next. So we all go through life, we have conversations, we look for opinions, we give opinions, we do all these things. But sometimes you just sit on yourself and you think about, what do I know and how am I going to make this next move the right move? And a while ago, it hit me that sometimes standing alone is better than standing with people who don't always value you. Gives you the space and time to think it through. So this track musically is my way of interpreting that emotion, and you need to have some time and space to figure out the next move.
That resonates with me. So let's enjoy it together. I'm Doc Hardy, listening to the Doc Hardy Show on WPKN. The song is called Solitude by Brendan Rothwell. Here we go. I had to let that piano fade out. Didn't want to talk over that. That beautiful song,
Thank you.
Solitude, Solitude by my guest, Brendan Rothwell. You're listening to the Doc Hardy Show on WPKN 89.5 FM. We are broadcasting from downtown Bridgeport, Connecticut, reaching Fairfield, Litchfield, and New Haven counties in Connecticut, Suffolk County on New York's Long Island, and streaming around the world at WPKN.org. That song was called Solitude. You sent me a little post, which I thought was interesting, from smoothjazz.com global. Brendan Rothwell brings us his easy grooving, buoyantly funky, and often soulfully meditative. And I think, the drifting, divine, and solitude to me fit that vibe of soulfully meditative. That's the perfect way to describe what I got from those songs. Beautiful job with Solitude.
Cool. Thank you.
So that brings us to the final chapter. And to me, it was not so final. It was like the song's called For Now. And so
right.
For now, you left us with, to me, I felt like a little anticipation for what's next, because here you've reintroduced yourself. You've gone back to your roots, right? You've gone back to the where it started for you musically in terms of instrumentation, and now you've married that with the signature sound of your bass, and the acoustic play in this song is beautiful. You obviously did not just learn the piano last year, so you didn't learn it during COVID. You definitely have mastered that instrument. What can you tell us about For Now?
Well, thank you for the intro. That was quite something. So the piano it's a great example, right, of keeping things simple. And so I know some amazing piano players, right here in town. There's a guy that I know who just kills it every time. Sheldon Zamboa, if he's listening, kills it every time. I know some guys from out of town. I know some guys from America who play amazingly well. And that's not what I'm trying to be. I'm not professing to do that. What I do is use, in this instance, an acoustic piano sound to convey the message. I'm not trying to, play a solo and blast past everybody else and do all those things. Plenty of people do that really well. My goal with this piece of music was to really subdue, I guess, the listener, because it is the end of this album, to your point, and it is the end of the album For Now. What inspired this piece of music, though, real briefly, was that last year, very sadly, I lost a friend of mine. And he'd been diagnosed with a terrible disease that meant his life was going to change drastically and quite fast, and would probably end in a matter of a few years. In this province in Canada, it is now legal to end your life with medical intervention. And that's what he chose to do. So that's kind of a brave thing anyway. We had a celebration of life for him. He asked me if I'd play. I would sooner play Wembley Stadium on my own than play for his celebration of life when he's going to be there as well. But anyway, of course I did it. I had to do it. And then there's a recording of that he heard and loved, and it ended up being the piece of music that he heard last as he left this planet. It's from the Sentiment album. It's the track is Reflection. And literally he was playing that in the hospital room as they administered the injections. Wow. And his friends were given a little note to say, at this time on Monday, when he leaves, log in and listen to this piece of music, right? So this isn't about streams and how many people are playing it and how important. It's about right then, that point in time and what it meant. It's the last thing he heard as he left the planet. So that partly is why I destroyed much of what I'd written last year, and decided that no, if somebody can do that, I have to do better.
Wow.
And then what became For Now actually started out that week after his departure. And I sat here at the piano and I came up with a very, very simple little keyboard motif, and I started to move around a couple of keys and I thought that's all I need to do. I don't need to show anybody else what I'm capable of doing. I simply need to play that, let it be. Of course, that had already been written. And then bring some bass in and see where we go. That's all there is to this track. In the background, you'll hear some little bells kicking off halfway through. The fade out to this thing is way too long for most radio stations, but not for the great Doc and WPKN. Thank you. And I'm immensely proud of this particular piece of music, the album overall, of course, but this particular piece because it's as far away from what people think or expect today's contemporary / smooth jazz is supposed to be. I didn't write it to do that. I wrote it because it needed to happen. And I put it at the end of the album because, as you rightly said and rightly pointed out, this, for now, is where we leave it. But I will be back. Have no fear of that.
Well, let's give the listeners a listen at chapter 12, the final track. For now, play this, and then we'll come back and have some final comments by Brendan about the project and talk about the future, what you plan on doing going forward. I'm Doc Hardy. This is the Doc Hardy Show. The track is called For Now, off of Brendan's release, Destiny. That's it for now. That's all 12 tracks off of Brendan Rothwell's latest release, Destiny, available on all platforms. Brendan, it's a marvelous piece of art. I enjoy it every time I listen to it, and I really appreciate you taking the time to be a guest on my show this evening and share it with the listeners. Amazing. Uh,
Well, it's a
It's your breakout. I believe it is. That's my opinion.
thank you, thank you. I'll take it, and my thanks again for inviting me along. This is a great way to spend 2 hours of any Saturday
Yeah.
evening, quite honestly. And,
Yeah.
you know,
And-
you as you know, my early adopter, right from day one. You've been playing my music and supporting what I do. So, sincere thanks to you for that.
Also, want to thank you. You all listening don't realize this, but Brendan and I had a couple of technical meetings to try to make this happen. We with Zoom, experimented with Zoom. It's broadcasting on YouTube, something that I didn't think a week ago I could do, and yet here we are. And we'll look at it, see how we can improve on it. But I wanted to start somewhere, so we've started. It's
Great.
a lot easier to do an interview when you can see the person you're talking to. I think we learned that during the last 2 years, and this is a better conversation, I think, because of Zoom. And so I look forward to doing this with other artists going forward.
Yeah, totally.
Right from my studio, so I can give you the best sound and best experience. So tell us, what can we expect from you in the next 12 months? What do you got going on?
Well, I have a medical appointment on Monday where they're going to check my eyesight so I can get out of the shirt and maybe change my wardrobe. I think the immediate term is kind of where I'm at. So obviously, I mean, Destiny's been out on the platforms now for almost a month. July when it came out. In addition to the platforms as well, I will plug the fact that I do have the album on CD. And I'm very pleased to say that right after the launch that weekend, we were over in Ottawa, and I had so many emails from people and all over. I mean, the US is obviously my biggest audience for this type of music anyway. But the US, UK, Canada, thankfully, Japan, Netherlands, Australia, all these places came in and people are buying the album. So, you can do it on the Amazon thing for sure, but I don't really see what I should when you go that route. So jump on my website, brendanrothwell.com. Destiny and Sentiment and Time on My Hands I have available. I'll sign them for you. If you prefer me not to, just let me know, and we can get them out to you for sure. So I would love to plug that. Oh, I just did. There you go. But the future, I think, at this point, I've been very fortunate as I've been sort of building my name in this little piece of the musical slice of cake. And, I've worked with some great people. R.L. Walker, I did the collaboration track with him. Spontaneous Groove and Combustion, the band with the longest name in the world. Wayne Gutschall, he and I did a track last summer that's still doing really well now, over a year old. Sylvia Bennett, I just done a track with her that's going to be coming out. We don't know when, but some point that's going to be a fun piece to do. And of course, Reza Khan, I've been working with Reza this year on a number of tracks actually that I think probably spring next year we'll start to see the light of day. So there's been a number of sort of side projects where I've been brought in as a sideman or as a guest artist. And those will gradually release over the next 6, 12, 18 months. My own material, I'm going to really give this album probably 3 or 4 months of sort of playtime to see what it does, see where it goes, and see, quite honestly, what the reaction is from people as they hear it. That will then help me determine where I go next with my music. So do I do more as a solo artist, or do I in fact stick true to writing my original music and embellish that with maybe other players? We'll see. I'm still in two minds about that.
Right.
You know, I'm definite on Spotify, but I'm in two minds about guest artists. So we'll
Right.
kind of see where that goes. But as we said with the last track, for now, I mean, that's it for now. But I will be back, and whatever I do, it will be musically as colorful as the shirt that I sit in this evening in front of you.
Thank you so much for everyone. We spent 2 hours with my friend, Anglo-Canadian bassist, multi-instrumentalist, Brendan Rockwell. His new CD, Destiny, available on all platforms. Go ahead and download that tonight and enjoy some of that meditative music in the morning. Brendan, I'm going to catch up with you in a couple days. And,
Sounds good.
you know, just kind of follow up from this discussion. But thank you so much. We're going to stop the live feed to YouTube because we're going to start playing licensed material that's not approved by the artist. Brendan, of course, approved us playing his music, but I'm going to do some more Earth, Wind, and Fire. Jump on to WPKN.org if you want to hear the rest of my Earth, Wind, and Fire set. The Doc Hardy, here we go with Shining Star.